All right, hey, this is Karila here at Metal Life Magazine. I am delighted to once again be talking to Karl Sanders of the infamous Nile. They're coming out with an album on, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Karl, August 28th. What Should Not Be Unearthed comes out via Nuclear Blast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Karila?
I am doing amazingly because I've listened to this album 1,001 times, but my iTunes only says 8, and I think that's kind of BS. So, tell me now, I actually kind of want to know, how many times do you listen to an album in full before you decide it's good enough to ship off to the label?
Well, you know, that's a great question. I think we've heard the album so many times by then, it's not even countable. I think when you're first writing a song, you probably hear it 100 fucking times before you even show it to bandmates. And then you play it another 300 times in a band room before you record it. Then while you're recording it and mixing it, you hear it another 500 times. By the time anybody even else gets to hear it, you've already heard it 1,000 fucking times. So at that point, there's no self-objectivity left. I mean, it's just not even fucking possible.
Does it make it harder for you hearing it 100 times? Like, how do you go about looking at the song from a fresh angle when you've heard it 100 times in the same recording process?
Well, there you go. You know, you just said an essential truth right there. How do you? And it's impossible. You can't. And if anybody's being honest and real, they'll say it's very rare that artists have any sort of objectivity until some time goes by. Like after the record's done, right, and it's out there and it's heard enough, generally get busy with something else. I don't listen to it for a while. And then if a year or so can go by, then I listen to it and I go, oh, wow, that doesn't sound anything like I thought it fucking sounded. Holy fucking shit. What in God's name was I thinking?
Is that kind of why you took 3 years to go from Sethu to this? Just so you could have that kind of gap of time to listen to songs?
No, we just honestly were busy touring and promoting that record. It was like a 3-year tour cycle. And we went as many places as we could. It's really the only way we survive these days as a band is to tour your ass off. It's a tough gig. Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. And speaking of tours, while we're on that subject, you're going to be in Europe with Suffocation. Why, oh why must you take my 2 favorite death metal bands and go to the other side of the pond, Karl? Why?
So that you would have a good reason to come out there and see us.
But tell me about this tour. 2 awesome American slam metal bands just coming out to destroy Europe.
We're really excited about this tour. It's been a long time that we've been talking with the Suffocation guys about making the tour happen. It's just something we both really wanted to do. And it is going to be fun. It's going to be an incredible night of metal that we get to take all across Europe for a whole month. I believe it will be a tour to remember.
I think as far as Nile goes, as far as tour packages, I think you pick really wisely, and you always try to make sure that, because sometimes just touring isn't enough, but you know, you're touring with a great band who you fit amazingly with. And I remember seeing you for the first time when you were picking up locals and you did that back-to-back set. Like, I love how Nile tries to put as much variety as they can into their tour sets.
Well, there you go. If you don't pack in some variety somehow, some way, you'll go insane. But the reality of day-to-day touring, it's an insane level of mundane repetitiveness. I mean, you're looking at, you know, the inside of the tour bus all day long. You're looking at the same group of people all day long. You know, all the highways start looking the fucking same. Every truck stop starts looking the same. Really, the only exciting part is, you know, the audiences are different every night. And that is the great joy of the whole thing, is the people that come to the show. Because we're the same band. You know, we have to eat the same pizza and drink the same beer every fucking day. We're a constant. But the audience each night makes the show either great or makes the show okay or makes the show suck.
Coming back from, instead of going to tours, I want to talk a little bit about the album. And one thing very interesting that I heard you say is that it's kind of like you had an approach to the album very much like Annihilation, but more streamlined for brutality's sake. Now, you don't seem like the kind of person to me, Karl, who would go back and try to be like, well, it's like this other album that we created. You kind of seem like someone who wouldn't necessarily want to dwell on like, well, it sounds like this worked because it's something in the past. Was kind of comparing it to Annihilation a way to explain it to fans, or was it really you like wanting to go back to the days of Annihilation?
I think you're absolutely right. I'm not the kind of person who likes to dwell in the past. Often when people are asking you questions, as an artist, and they're trying to get a frame of reference, if you try and communicate, well, it's like the Beatles' White Album, except kind of like Sgt. Pepper's too. It's just frames of reference. I absolutely don't think this record is Annihilation Part 2.
I don't either.
This is very much its own creature. But if you had to pick out of the entire Nile catalog a frame of reference by which to tell someone who has no idea whatsoever what this new album is even vaguely like, and you had 7 albums to pick from, well, that would probably be the one that might give somebody a general indication. But do I think it's like Annihilation? No. Do we want to time travel and repeat ourselves? Absolutely not. Yeah, from this record, we very much had a very unique approach, an unusually fresh frame of mind as to what we wanted to achieve.
I found there were a couple tracks, I would say my favorite track is Negating the Abominable Coils, because there's so many. I feel like that song is an accumulation of the rapid fire brutality of Annihilation, the kind of looming darkness of Whom the Gods Detest and Darkened Shrines. It all just kind of accumulated and showed that you understand your history and you know how to grow from that rather than copying and pasting something.
Wow, you make that sound pretty awesome. I think that makes me want to go listen to that song again.
So I have another question for you based on something I read that you talked about. No record that you make comes without its share of challenges. Now, because What Should Not Be Unearthed is such an innovative album for Nile, were there any new obstacles that you really learned from, or was it stuff that you were revisiting from perhaps previous albums that you hadn't quite conquered yet?
I think it's more like the second thing. I think, each stepping stone on the path of learning comes with its own amount of pain that helps you remember, in the future not to do that fucking thing again. Holy shit. And growth is a painful process. Without painful growth, we would all, as human beings, be stuck on the same treadmill.
Right.
Sometimes I think that the last couple albums that we did actually led us to where we are right now, which I think right now we're in a pretty healthy fucking place. We made this record, very much, for our fans. A lot of the concerns, and yearnings that we were having, on the last couple records to prove ourselves. We can play fast and clean, and, the musicianship is impeccable, and we're going to take that and stick it in everybody's face. That's all well and good, I suppose, but I think, somehow the fans get left out of that equation. And I think fans are the reason a band has a continued existence. Without fans, you're nobody. So this record was definitely, from the time the first song even started begun writing, it was something we had on our minds. We want to give our fans a Nile record that they would want to have.
You also mentioned that Sethu was not really intended to be a definitive Nile record. Was part of the reason because it was something that you didn't really have the fans in mind first?
I think that answer is intrinsically yes. The essence of what was going on with us, at that time, we were very much wanting to show, to prove to ourselves and to the world we can play incredibly fast, and it is clean as fuck. when you approach music from that angle, unfortunately, the listener is left out of the equation. I mean, if you're playing music just to prove you can play music, well, that's a very tight little circle.
Yeah.
And I think, that makes for albums that are not necessarily as enjoyable to listen to. I'm not bashing Sethu. There's some incredible stuff on Sethu, and
It's an incredibly brilliant album. I just found it very humbling and very honest of you to be these were just, you're not necessarily never going to play a song from Ithaphalic or At the Gate of Sethu, but you're just very honest about where your place was at that time. It's kind of cool because, every time you see a band coming out with a new album nowadays, they're just Tom Araya says, quote, "This is our best record yet." And you're always like, well, how are you going to believe that? You know what I mean? But I feel like you would be the one to say, yeah, At the Gate of Sethu, okay, a great record because we worked our asses off on it. But you're not going to necessarily say it's the best album you ever came out with.
I think hopefully this time the results speak for themselves. One of the things that is challenging when you come out with a new record is if you're going to talk to a couple hundred journalists, it starts feeling a little bit like rhetoric. Yeah, we got this new album and it's great. Go buy it. That eats away at your soul after a while. So this time around, I'm much more interested in keeping it low-key and real. I don't necessarily think this record is a definitive Nile record either, but I will say this record is heavy, and we played this one from the heart, and it's meant to be enjoyed.
There's just so much creativity here, and you all work so well together. Like you could tell, there's no contrasting elements. Everything just kind of blends together, and you all synchronize so well.
What you just said was an edict that was enforced from the get-go. That what was going to be important writing these songs was the songwriting and how well the elements work together and how we as a team work together to make songs that are enjoyable to listen to. And any element that didn't actually help the songs was not allowed to stay. And that's kind of ruthless. Mm-hmm. And it's another level of discipline on another level. Because there were many great riffs, many great ideas that we just did not allow to stay because it was too technical or it served only the purpose of being a fucking awesome riff for being an awesome riff, right, or an impossible drum part just to be an impossible drum part. I mean, we worked together as a team and some of it was painful. I think this was, in some ways, we had to be tougher on ourselves about what was allowed to stay in these songs. And, that's not an easy thing to self-edit. And there's definitely a balance that had to be struck between, as a technical death metal band, managing and harnessing the technique for a higher purpose, and the higher purpose being the enjoyment of the listener.
I definitely got that, so good job.
Thank you, Karila.
My last question for you involves you trying to predict a fan favorite, so one that fans will find themselves shouting to.
I like to think that I am also a metal fan. And I know that when I first heard the original song demos for Call of Destruction, Evil to Cast Out Evil, and In the Name of Amun, that I knew these would be audience participation kind of songs.
Yep.
We want to bring metal to the people. I really enjoy when the band and the fans can come together as one and enjoy metal together. That's an incredible spiritual thing, and that to me means more than all the fucking fast crazy licks put together. It's the band and their fans together. That's what fucking makes metal.
I can't wait to see the fan reaction from this. I think people are going to be as pleased as I am, but definitely not more than I am, because I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Thank you so much, Karl, for joining us on Metal Life, and we hope to see you in the U.S. very